Welcome to another edition of the Camel Clutch Blog Extra podcast. And today's podcast is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to bounce around on different topics in today's wrestling. We're going to take a look at some of the current blogs on the Camel Clutch blog. We're also going to take a look at some upcoming blogs and just talk some old school, talk some new school, talk some rumors, talk about what went down recently at Battleground and whatever else we could squeeze into the next 30 to 45 minutes. And it's a real pleasure today to be joined by a longtime friend of mine, Chris Illuminati. He is a published author. He's a freelance writer, big wrestling fan, has written many pieces about pro wrestling. So really excited to have him here on the podcast. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Eric, how are you doing, my friend?
Chris, I am doing great. I know we've been talking about doing a podcast together for about 6 years now. So
yeah, it's finally come to fruition. 6 years.
Yeah, it's a lot of hype. It's kind of like Sting and Undertaker. You know, you just don't know if it can really live up to the hype.
It is. I just hope it's not like Sting and Hogan at Starrcade, where it was just the worst thing you've ever seen.
I just hope that it's not like Sting and anything he did in TNA.
That's true. You know, I understand all the Sting rumors and the hype and everybody excited for him coming to WWE. And people ask me, they're like, are you excited to see Sting in the WWE? And I say, I would have been 10 years ago.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
If Sting moved over with the whole, and you know what? And you know, why we touched on that, you know, maybe because you have a much better memory than I do and mind. Why do you remember why Sting didn't make the jump over?
You know, if I remember right, there were several occasions where Vince McMahon made a play for him, and he was just loyal to WCW. And then there was a point when WCW was sold, and if I remember this right, Sting kind of went through this I gotta choose my words carefully here in this PCH. He kind of went through this whole change of life where he became a born again Christian.
That's what I thought.
Yes. And if I remember right, he just didn't agree with the direction that the WWE was going. But yet, you know, you can turn on TNA and have midgets masturbating in a trash can. So go figure.
Well, that's all part of God's plan, I believe.
Indeed. So that's kind of what kept him out. So let me ask you, Chris. You know, a lot of people are getting hyped for this Sting Undertaker match, which I don't even think is going to happen. Yeah. But there are reports that he's going to wrestle at WrestleMania. I almost think it's better at this point in his career to just not do anything and kind of leave fans wanting more, because he's going to be 56 by the time he gets in there. And if you watch any of his TNA stuff, I mean, he's obviously lost a step, rightfully so at his age. What do you think? You want to see him in there? And if you do, who would you want to see him with?
You know, okay, I'm okay with nostalgia. I'll see him in there once or twice just for the old, you know, gratification of it. But my problem is, because I'm such an old school wrestling fan, I want to see the bleach blonde, you know, Stinger, that Sting. You know, as much as I love the whole Crow and I love that whole angle in the beginning, if we're really taking it back, I want to go way back. Yeah. I want to go original Sting. What I don't want to see, I don't think I want to see the Undertaker match.
Yeah.
I get it. I get the nostalgia of it. I really wouldn't have wanted to see it if Undertaker was undefeated.
Yes.
Because if somehow Sting came out of it and that was the one loss, which I don't think that would have happened.
Yeah.
But because I don't think McMahon, he's not going to take arguably the most loyal person in his company and give him that one loss to a guy who wouldn't even jump ship and finally came over when it came down to like DVD sales.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, let's be honest. That's why he's not doing it for a career. You know, it's not a career move. It's not I don't think he really cares about WWE Hall of Fame. I think it's for like, you know, I have this legacy. The legacy is going to be on DVD and on this WWE network. Let me try and control it as much as I can, because if I don't, it might be one of those situations where, I don't know if a lot of people remember. Do you remember the first Ultimate Warrior DVD that came out?
Oh, yeah. The self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior.
Yes, that basically bashed him for an hour and a half.
Yes.
Not that they would bash Sting, but he wouldn't have creative control over what people saw from his legacy. And knowing the WWE, they're going to put together a best of DVD with like Sting and RoboCop, Shockmaster, you know. So yeah. I think that was part of the play here. You know, Do I want to see him in the ring again? Sure, why not? Would I be crushed if he never wrestled again? No, not really.
Yeah. I think that the opportunity to make it happen was back at WrestleMania 27 when they were showing those videos, those black and white videos, and they were having, I forget what it was. It was like 217, whatever the year was. They get flashed.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. And everybody just assumed it was Sting. It was never going to be Sting. At one point, they did have some conversations, but there was so much buzz and so much hype, and it was 4 years ago. So Undertaker was in better shape. He had two great matches three great matches back to back with both Hunter and CM Punk. So he obviously could go back then. You're talking about Sting, who would have been in his early 50s, still old, but he still had some gas left in the tank. I think that was the time to capitalize on it. And I think once they weren't able to make it happen at 27, then I think you just shut the door on it.
Yeah, I agree. But, I think the WWE, they're going to want to cash in on nostalgia. They're going to want to cash in on, the last Sting. I don't know. We're talking about the Sting part of it. From everything we know about what happened at WrestleMania and everything we know about the Taker, can the Taker do it?
Yeah, that's a big question. And, I just had this conversation as a guest on somebody's podcast the other night. And, I don't know. I might be crazy here. And I've had people tell me that I'm crazy for assuming this. But there is a part of me that believes that somewhere in deep in Titan Towers that Vince McMahon and The Undertaker and Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar are the only people that know that they are building for a rematch at WrestleMania 31. And I know that there were just reports that came out that Undertaker is done and he's not going to wrestle, but I don't know, Chris. I'm looking at this thing and the way that Paul Heyman has been milking this streak. And we're talking about 2014, and this is an era where you see a finish on a pay-per-view and it's forgotten about, the next night on Raw. They don't even acknowledge what happened last week on television.
Right.
And here we are in July now, and Heyman's still milking it. And I think there are a couple different scenarios that you could pull off here. And I think the money would be huge for an Undertaker-Lesnar rematch, for Undertaker to come back and try and shut this guy's mouth. And I think that there are a couple of different avenues you can go down. And I hate this. I hate fantasy booking, but I'm going to do it here anyway. And I'm curious for your thoughts on it. Assuming Lesnar gets the championship at SummerSlam, which we'll probably talk about at some point, you could either have The Undertaker start demanding this rematch somewhere towards the end of the year, kind of like how Triple H was asking like how he was asking Triple H for the rematch at 28, which was really, really weird in retrospect. And you have him start throwing out this challenge, and you have Heyman blowing it off. Why would we do this again? We already made our point. And you either A, have Undertaker enter the Royal Rumble and have him win the Royal Rumble and win a title shot and wind up putting up his career against Lesnar's championship at WrestleMania because he's got nothing to put on the line, or you have Undertaker cost Lesnar the title leading up to WrestleMania. So at that point, Lesnar demands to have the match. And again, Undertaker puts his career up against Lesnar. I think there is so much money to be made with that it just amazes me that people are overlooking that in favor of Sting, Undertaker, or Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with you. And here's what I like about what you just said. Here's where I see it playing out. Let's say, devil's advocate, not even devil's advocate, Lesnar walks away from Survivor Series with the title, okay? Mm-hmm. We all know the next big baby face is Roman Reigns.
Yeah.
But he's not quite ready yet.
Right.
So what I liked about what you said was, let's say Lesnar takes it at Survivor Series. Let's say you get Roman Reigns kind of ready. Instead of Reigns and Lesnar at WrestleMania, it's Reigns and Lesnar at Survivor Series. Reigns takes it at Survivor Series with the help of The Undertaker, causing a distraction, therefore setting up Undertaker and Lesnar at WrestleMania.
There you go. I mean, I think there's I don't think that there's another match that they could possibly put on paper with anybody at this point, Rock included, unless maybe they brought back Steve Austin, right, that would be as much of a draw as Undertaker going for revenge against Brock Lesnar.
Right. And here's what else I like about that too. You have a Lesnar loss. Reigns wins the title. It's not a legitimate loss because of interference
Right.
or whatever it is. You can have that feud kind of building in the background while Lesnar, does his thing at WrestleMania against the Undertaker, and then rematch wise, you can bring it back all the way to SummerSlam again.
I love it.
If you have to. Here's the wrench I'm going to throw in it though. We don't know Lesnar's like availability. He's a part-timer. How part-time?
Yeah. And we don't know Undertaker's availability. I mean, all the rumors seem to be indicating that he's done. And,
Right.
he had, I mean, I've seen these rumors pop up in the past after WrestleMania. I remember after 29, there were a lot of rumors that he was done. So, I mean, I'm not necessarily writing him off at this point. But, I mean, if we were going to look at it logically today, you'd have to say, well, the guy's telling his friends he's done. So,
Right.
Who knows?
Well, the great thing about the Undertaker is he never really has to show up. You just need a guy flicking the lights on and throwing a couple thunderbolts and lightning, and the Undertaker was there, quote unquote.
Yeah,
So,
or they could reach out to Brian Lee.
yeah, Brian. Is he alive? He's alive, right?
I believe he is alive. Yes.
Okay, because this is terrible, but like there's so many wrestlers that I get confused about who's passed away. Like there was one the other day, and I was reading, and I was like, "Wait, he's gone." And it's Crush.
Yeah. You know what? When you thinking about it, if somebody had asked me if Crush was alive or had passed away, I'd probably say he was alive.
Yeah. See, I was doing research on something. And I was like, wait, when did he? You just sadly enough, you forget. Anyway, we got really morbid about that. But yeah,
yes.
all you need is a fake Undertaker, or they can even borrow the Kane hair.
Yes.
Or you know what? At this point, let's just use Kane because he has lost so much credibility.
Yes.
The past 3 months that people don't even care when he walks out anymore. They're just like, oh, it's Kane.
It's so funny because you can see where they are today with Kane, that there is absolutely no long-term booking in that company because, right before he joins the corporation, he's in Team Hell No, and he's in a comedy team with Hugs and whatever with Daniel Bryan. Before that, he's stalking Zack Ryder.
Yeah.
Then he's Libertarian Glenn. I mean, it's so hard for anybody to take him seriously. I think if Kane showed up today and there was no, and there was no past, or he had been in retirement for the last 3 years, I think he would have a much bigger impact today than, the fact that we've seen this guy go through all of these, this metamorphosis of change from month to month to month at this point, and yet, nobody really takes him seriously.
Yeah, and my favorite was on Raw on Monday night when he, everyone was telling Triple H all the reasons that they should fight John Cena, and Kane said, I could beat John Cena, and the first thing that popped in my mind was, 2 months ago, you lost to him in a stretcher match where he put you on a stretcher and pushed you across a line. I mean, terrible match as it is. Like, how are we supposed to believe that you can beat him when you can't even put him on a moving vehicle and roll him away? I don't. But again, like you said, it all goes back to creative, and it all goes back to, like, I don't know if it's injuries. I don't know what keeps them from going, you know what? Let's map out a 4-month plan of what we want to do.
Yeah.
And let's just execute it each week after week. I don't understand.
I don't understand it either. And, and Vince is the guy that made millions and millions of dollars, executing that same game plan for 20 something years, in the 80s. And his father perfected it. His father would bring in these guys and they'd beat the Jobbers for a couple of months. They beat Chief Jay Strongbow on the way up. They might beat Ivan Putski, and then they're challenging for the championship. And people are, and fans are clamoring to see Bruno Sammartino or Bob Backlund against Ken Patera because Patera just ran through the company. Whereas today, you have Daniel Bryan against Kane for the championship back a couple of months ago, and yet Kane is just coming off of being beaten by everybody.
Yeah, I don't understand it. And the funny thing is, I don't want to be. How can I say this? I don't want to be negative here, and I don't want to put other rumors out there that aren't. But everything we know about Vince McMahon over the years, just the ruthless businessman, the ego.
Ruthless aggression, Chris.
Yes.
Remember ruthless aggression.
I do. And think about that, Vince McMahon. Why hasn't he been on television? And when I say on television, like not even in a backstage promo or anything, it has to be years now, right?
I don't think it's been years. I think it's probably been I have to think that he popped his head out there at least once in the last 12 months. I remember back a couple of months ago, maybe it has been quite a year, to be honest with you, because I remember he was supposed to pop up in the Daniel Bryan storyline right after SummerSlam last year, and he was advertised. He was actually advertised as appearing on shows, and then at the last minute, for whatever reason, they decided to go in a different direction. And at WrestleMania, this past WrestleMania, I remember the original plan was to have Triple H against a guy that would be representing Vince for control of the company. And there were all kinds of rumors that it might be Steve Austin, it might be John Cena. And it seems like they have these ideas for Vince, and for whatever reason, he's not out there. And I have no idea why.
I'm just afraid is something more wrong. Like, this is terrible to say, but as a Yankee fan, I remember when there was, in the last couple of years of Steinbrenner's life, when they just used to kind of like trot him out, put him in a press box. Like, not that something's wrong with Vince, but is it a vanity thing? Like, he doesn't want to be on TV because he's getting up in age? Like, what does he really want people to think that Triple H and Stephanie are in complete control? Like, why isn't a man whose whole life was built on ego not on television, especially when something happens where, his stock plummets and he loses billions of dollars and a network is failing? Like, why isn't the one proven moneymaker year after year with feuds, why isn't he showing up?
It's a good question.
Like, is there something else wrong? I hope there isn't. I don't want there to be. But is there something else wrong? Or are they keeping him off for so long that eventually when he does pop up, it's this huge thing?
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know if he's just so busy right now trying to dig the company out from this immense hole that they've been put into by the network, that he just feels like he just doesn't want any part of it because he's just so focused on the network. I don't know, but it's a good question. I mean, I can't answer that. I'm going to guess that he's okay because, with so many dirt sheets and so many news sites, that you'd think somebody that worked for the company would have told somebody if there was something going on. But yeah, like you said, maybe it's vanity. Maybe it's just simply vanity.
I don't know. And I kind of want him to come back. I think a lot of the things that are missing in Raw and in the overall show are the things that Vince used to be responsible for. I mean, you and I talked about it a couple weeks ago on email. Mm-hmm. I think it was a 6-man match where Bray Wyatt was one of the people in the match, and he came out to the ring second to last, and we all know what Bray Wyatt's entrance looks like. Yeah. So Bray Wyatt comes out, the whole stadium goes dark, everybody puts up their, not their lighters, but their cell phones now. Bray Wyatt goes in the ring, the lights come back up, and then Alberto Del Rio comes out. And you're just kind of like, wait, shouldn't that be it? Like, shouldn't Bray Wyatt, like, the light should go up and people should just start brawling? Like, what? And that seems like a very, and actually Vince Russo touched on it in one of his videos, saying that, like, that's something that never would have happened. That's Wrestling 101, that entrance. And that's something that I think Vince would be like, hey, this needs to be fixed. But he's not around.
Yeah, and you know what? And Vince Russo is right, and that's what's odd is, there have been more of these little mistakes, this lack of continuity in the WWE, more so I would say in the last 12 months than I could ever remember. And I mean, I remember as a kid, and then when I started reading the newsletters as a teenager, and just following the business closely since then. I mean, just those kind of things never happened. And if they did happen, you would see some story about how Vince either fired somebody or went on a tirade or did something. And now, I mean, this stuff happens all the time. Look at the whole SummerSlam debacle, just the week before, what was the last pay-per-view? The week before Battleground, you had posters, or no, it was the week before Money in the Bank. You had posters out there advertising John Cena versus Brock Lesnar for the championship at
Right.
SummerSlam, already tipping off what the result of Money in the Bank was going to be.
Right.
And then you had the same, then you had a promo leak this past week before Battleground, so you knew that Cena was definitely retaining. I mean, see, these are just things that would just never happen in the past.
Yeah, and they're just gonna kind of getting through, and it's making. Well, you know what I love now? I love the Tuesday morning My Bad videos from Triple H. They should be called My Bad, where it's just like he addresses things that they were screwed up on Raw. And one of my favorite ones was a couple weeks ago when he does the four-way match and he puts Roman Reigns in the match. The guy who a week prior, Vicky Guerrero gets fired because she puts him in a match, and now the CEO is putting him in a match. That doesn't make any sense. And then Triple H comes in and does the My Bad video the next day saying, this is the reason I put Roman Reigns in the match.
Yeah.
He's like explaining the continuity of it. It's like, it kind of reminds me of the skit on SNL when they do Fox News.
Yeah.
And they go, these are all the things that Fox News screwed up in the last hour.
It's so true. It really is true. And, this whole idea of putting Roman Reigns in the match because it's best for business. Okay, that does make sense, but the last, I don't know, since 1997, we've been seeing heel authority figures screwing with the top babyface in the company, the top drawer in the company, trying to get them to lose belts, trying to end their careers, trying to
strip them of belts, getting them to get fired.
Yeah, exactly. So this whole, doing what's best for business thing doesn't hold water. It's like, well, then why have, an authority figure in the first place, a heel authority figure? Because at the end of the day, if your interest is what's best for business, you're not going to be screwing with Roman Reigns to begin with.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I guess we should chalk it up to, like I just said, SNL. I mean, it is a weekly show that needs to get written like 3 days before, and things happen, guys get hurt. I mean, Brad News Barrett goes out 3 days before, or a week before pay-per-view, 2 weeks before pay-per-view, and they come up with a battle royal. I mean, we could sit here for days. It's funny. We started this off with Sting and Undertaker.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you're absolutely right. We could talk about this for a long time. I know we exchange emails on it fairly often. Yes. We might as well touch on Battleground, since it's not even a week old yet. In my opinion, I thought it was the weakest pay-per-view or special event. I don't even know what they're calling them anymore, but the weakest show of the year. I just, they've had these shows over the last, several months that on paper don't look very good, but then when they actually deliver the product, there's usually 2 or 3 matches that actually turn out to be very good. So it's like, not so bad of a show. But this one, it just didn't happen. In my opinion, nothing clicked, and I have no idea. I can't even fathom why you would advertise Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose and not deliver on it. I mean, it's so WCW. I mean, it's exactly what WCW. And that was the one match, at least to a lot of the reaction that I read on social media, that was the big sell to a lot of that internet crowd or to a lot of people. And they didn't even give it to you. So, in my opinion, I mean, it's kind of hard to bitch and complain anymore when you're paying $9.99 for these shows.
Right.
But, at the end of the day, I thought it was a pretty weak show.
I thought it was weak as well. I think the problem here is, and this has been the WWE's problem with a lot of things, the business model is the business model that started 15 or 20 years ago, and they're sticking with it. And 15 or 20 years ago, they used to have these pay-per-views to compete with other pay-per-views.
Yes.
So you were jamming them down people's throats every month, a pay-per-view. I don't know if that's necessary anymore. I don't know if they could go back to just the big 4 or big 5, but I don't know if every month we need a pay-per-view.
So, okay, let's talk about that. The right now they're struggling with the network, and the only sell to keep the network anymore. I mean, to me anyway, the only reason to keep the network month to month is for these pay-per-views, is for these B show pay-per-views. Right. And I agree 100% that there's really not a need to have a pay-per-view every month at all. I like your idea. Go back to quarterly, maybe 6 a year, something. But I don't think you need to have 10 to 12 a year. But at the same time with this network, if I wasn't getting a B show every month, if I wasn't getting that pay-per-view every month for $9.99, I would have canceled a long time ago.
Really?
Absolutely. I mean, okay, I wanted to talk about the network with you, so I guess this is a good transition for it. I think the network has been a huge disappointment for somebody like me. And I know we're kind of in the same boat. For an old school wrestling fan, I signed up for this network. I mean, it makes my job easier as a blogger to get these pay-per-views now for $9.99 a month as opposed to paying $60. So obviously that's the big sell for me. But if I wasn't blogging and if I didn't have my website, I would have jumped all over this thing for the nostalgia, to get the old MSG shows, to get the old TV shows with all the jobber matches and the interviews, to get TNT, the Spectrum Wrestling shows, all that stuff. And they own libraries of like Mid-South Wrestling and World Classic, all that stuff. I would have loved it, and I would have jumped all over it. But what they've done is practically nothing. Is out of the gate, they threw up, about half a dozen of those vault shows, as they call them, and they haven't added a whole lot at all since they launched in February. So for a nostalgia fan like me, I could have watched what I needed to watch within the first 3 weeks and been done with it, because they haven't added anything. But the reason I keep it is for the B shows. How about you? What are your thoughts on the network? What do you like? What do you don't like? And what do you think? Would you be a subscriber if it wasn't for those B shows?
This is what I envisioned when they said the WWE Network, and maybe I'm just a different school of thinking on this. When they said WWE Network, when I think of WWE old content, what I want is old content not touched by new hands.
Right.
I don't want a package of the best of Wrestling Challenge. I want Wrestling Challenge from minute 1 till minute 60.
Me too.
I want to go back like it's Saturday morning, and I want to watch the whole thing from start to finish. You know what? Like, some people might not care about SD Jones versus Don Morocco, but I kind of do. I want to, for the nostalgia point of it. Like, I wanted that angle of it. I don't want – basically what the network feels like to me is all the DVDs I never bought, they're now showing them on a network.
Yes.
It's like they're repackaged. I don't want that. I want the feeling of the old wrestling. Even if it doesn't jive with your current storylines or whatever's going on, or, just like show me what I want, like the old USA Network shows.
Like Primetime Wrestling and TNT.
Exactly. I want the Bobby Heenan show. Do you remember the Bobby Heenan show?
Oh, I love the Bobby Heenan show. It's one of my favorites.
I want a year of that. Like, show me that kind of stuff. Open new wrestling fans, expose new wrestling fans to that. I don't want a network that shows me all the DVDs I never bought and then a couple pay-per-views.
Yeah, and at this point in time, they launched the network in February. If you were really chomping at the bit to watch these old pay-per-views, chances are pretty good that by now you would have watched everything that you wanted to see at this point. Yeah. And to me, I mean, there's endless old content, endless nostalgia, and yet they don't touch it. They're more interested in, like you said, in kind of putting their countdowns on there and putting up their new shows, and they'll put up a best of Raw, from 2012 or something, and it's just very frustrating because I don't know if you ever subscribed. WWE, they had that on-demand service, that Classics on Demand.
I remember it, but I did not subscribe.
I subscribed to it, and that's what I thought this was going to be. On Classics on Demand, you got a new it was a ton of nostalgia. You got new full-length house shows every month from like the 80s, 70s sometimes. You had old television shows. You had random old matches on there. I mean, it was very nostalgia-based, and this one is not nostalgia-based at all. And it's really disappointing. It really is. And if not for those B shows, I mean, I'd be done, probably. I'd probably just be done with it.
And when we talk nostalgia, like, I mean, you and I are old men. Like, we like stuff from the 80s and 70s and 80s. But nostalgia to some people is like 1994. So show me WCW Saturday Night from 1994.
Exactly.
The whole thing. Show me, like, Tom Zink versus Brian Pillman. Show me, that kind of stuff. If you're a wrestling fan, you like wrestling, take the NFL Network. I'm a Giants fan. That won't stop me from turning on the NFL Network and watching the Vikings and the Raiders from 1973 because I like football. So if you like wrestling, you will go and watch old wrestling. Just for the mere fact of, holy cow, who's that guy? Like,
Yeah.
Just the weird angles and everything. Give it to me uncut, unfiltered, untouched by the WWE, and I'd probably, be a subscriber and get other people to subscribe.
Yeah.
I get my dad to subscribe to that.
You could, and that's the thing. It's. They're already going to get the fans that are watching week to week, the loyal fans that are watching that were buying the pay-per-views. You're going to get them no matter what.
Right.
In my opinion, who you need to reach are the people like us. But not us because we're going to watch, but people like us. If we weren't writing about wrestling or we weren't blogging about wrestling, and we're going on with our lives and we were doing something else, but if somebody said to me, hey, they have this network and the Bobby Heenan shows on there. Be like, hell, I'm all over that. And same thing with you. And I mean, we talk to these people all the time. I know you do, I do, that are like, oh, I used to love it when, but now they don't watch. And those are the people that would pay $9.99 to see that stuff. And yet they don't want them. But at the same time, what's equally interesting is you can go on YouTube and see all that stuff. And I assume that WWE would be incredibly vigilant once the network went up with trying to get this stuff taken down. And it's like they don't even care. They just let it up there.
Yeah, I mean, you can't chase it all down. Since we're talking about the network, I want to pitch them a show. Do you want to hear my show?
I would love it.
I think it would do bonanza ratings. I really do. Only because I think guys like you and I would appreciate it.
Yeah.
You take a wrestling show, let's say, WWE Wrestling Challenge from like 1991. You take two guys, like maybe one wrestler, one comic, two people, and you kind of like Mystery Science Theater it, where you watch for the entire hour and you just make wise ass comments the entire time.
I love it.
About the wrestling. They kind of had something like that. I remember, I don't know if it was the network or it was on WWE.com, where it was The Miz and it might have been Josh Matthews, where they watched old stuff, but it wasn't like, I'm talking like Mystery Science Theater. I want do you remember one of my favorite shows? Do you remember Cheap Seats?
Yeah, and they used to show the Mighty Igor. They showed some wrestling show with the Mighty Igor on it.
Yes. So two funny guys watch old wrestling.
Yes.
That's it. And they make comments about it.
Yeah, I think it's great.
That's my show.
I think it's great. And you know what, Chris? It's not that hard. I mean, I think if you and I could brainstorm for an hour, we could probably come up with a dozen, original shows that probably wouldn't cost a whole lot of money to make because you already own the content, just repurposing the content. Mm-hmm. And yet here we are. And I think the only content that's repurposed is on these WWE countdown shows, which are fun. I mean, I do like them, but I mean, there's just so much more that they could be doing. I don't know why. I don't understand it because, again, they were putting up all these shows for the last several years on Classics on Demand. So it's not like that. It's not like they have to go back and redo all these shows. A lot of these shows have already been redone. I just don't understand why they're not already up there.
Right. And to answer your original question, if it weren't for the pay-per-views, as big of a wrestling fan as I am, I don't know if I'd have the network.
Yeah. I don't know.
Which is very sad to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's talk about Raw a little bit. The Stephanie McMahon angle is an angle, or at least a segment, that's really been getting a huge response online and social media, and it's all been positive. People saying it's the best angle they've seen on there in quite some time, and it's hard to disagree. I thought it was excellent. I thought it was great, and sometimes I think that the problem with Stephanie McMahon is that they want to have it both ways. And I actually have a blog and draft about this. I probably should post it tomorrow now that I'm talking about it. But
you've got homework.
Yeah, I've got homework. You know how we like to put those blogs in the can on a rainy day when we have nothing else to write about.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yes. So, they like to have it both ways with her and even Triple H, where they'll have Stephanie McMahon out there slapping Brie Bella, and then 5 minutes later they'll have her championing the Special Olympics, in a video. And they had that whole thing, and it was beautiful, that whole campaign for this that boy Colin who got cancer, passed away from cancer.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it.
Yes, I did. It was, I couldn't even, honestly, I couldn't get through it.
Yeah, it was
too much. Like, yeah. Especially when you have kids, you're just like, oh God.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and then you have Triple H, palling around with Daniel Bryan in the video. And I think they announced the foundation, and the foundation was announced by Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. And it's like, okay, even if they are big proponents of it, why does it have to be them that announce it? Why can't it be John Cena? Why can't it be Vince McMahon? Why can't it be Daniel Bryan, who's all over the video with them? And I just think that the WWE, they're walking this too fine a line with Stephanie specifically, in that they want her to be, bitch, heel CEO 1 minute, and then the next minute they want her to be this likable, mom woman. I don't know. I just think that it's gotten way out of hand, and they really need to decide what they want to do here. Either she's gonna play her wrestling character, or she's gonna be a goodwill ambassador. But I don't think you can do both.
I agree with that. I do agree, and it's tough because this is one of the main reasons why the John Cena character has become so stale, is because they haven't been able to turn it. I mean, can you remember a person that's been a babyface as long as John Cena has? Or
Bruno Sammartino would probably be the only one.
But that was the 1950s.
And you know what, Chris? I don't even think he's been, because Cena's been a champion, been around longer than Bruno was. His reign, so to speak, has been his run, I guess would be a better way to phrase it, has been longer than Bruno's. So no, I don't remember a guy that's been around that's been a babyface longer.
So Cena's been around forever, and one of the problems is they cannot turn him heel because of everything he does with the Special Olympics and the Make-A-Wish Foundation and all of those things.
Yeah.
So the problem you have is, you can't change the character on TV because of what he does in real life, which makes sense. I understand that. Mm-hmm. So at least they're sticking with that. The Stephanie thing, I agree. You have to pick, either she's going to be the bitch or she's going to be this champion of, or if you have to, split the authority up again and make one the good guy and one the bad guy.
Yeah.
Play that character all the time. I do agree with you. It ruins the TV product to see, Daniel Bryan palling around with Triple H.
Yeah. It gets even better when they do those NXT specials on the network, because you have Triple H and Stephanie on those specials. I remember Stephanie was on one. I don't know if she was on both of them. But then she's a babyface when she's on the NXT special. Triple H is a babyface on the NXT special, and 2 nights later, or the next night on SmackDown, they're back at it again. And I think this goes back to exactly what we were talking about in the beginning of the show with Vince McMahon and the things that you would never see happen in the 80s. I mean, he fired Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik for riding in a car together.
Right. Yeah. Well, they were doing more than that, but
well, yes, but the fact they were in the car together was what got them canned.
That's a huge thing, and I think all of that goes not just back to continuity, but sometimes I feel like, and a lot of people are going to argue with me, I feel like sometimes the real person has way too much control of their on-screen character.
Right.
Like, I understand it should be like, okay, creative came up with this character. You guys agree on a character. This is how you're going to play it. You are always this character on TV. When the cameras are off, you can be your whatever person that you are.
Right.
But when the cameras are on, you have to be, from the minute Raw starts to the minute Raw ends, you're a dick.
Yeah.
Whatever TV show, you're a jerk every time on every TV show. And when you start getting Triple H, I'm the bad guy, but I'm also this cool, funny guy who makes funny,
Yeah.
I'm bad Triple H, but I'm occasionally DX Triple H. This funny thing. You can't do that. You can't, it doesn't work that way.
No.
Not on television. You can't watch any TV show. You can't have a character who's a bad person all of a sudden cracking jokes. Time. It doesn't work.
When I wrote the blog, it tells you how long ago I was. I made the same exact analogy to. I don't know if you watched 24.
I did the original time, not this time around.
Oh, okay. Well, there was this Russian villain, or I think she was Russian. I don't know, but there was this villain. There was this female villain in 24 this past season. That's exactly what I said in my blog. Is you can't have her out there, making jokes, on the commercials or championing the Special Olympics, and then expect to, have the audience loathe her for trying to blow the president of the United States up. When it comes back, I mean, you just don't do that.
Right. Now, here's what they have to do. They have to take a book. They have to take a book. They have to take a page from the old kind of bad guy, twist your mustache, tie you to train tracks type thing, where Stephanie is the heel she always plays the heel. When it comes to the Special Olympics, Stephanie plays the heel in that situation, and then good guy Daniel Bryan saves the day, or good guy John Cena saves the day.
I don't even think you need to do that. I think all you need to do is just keep the camera. Is just don't air any footage of her on television doing that Special Olympics stuff.
It's the McMahon ego.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's got to be. So she's got to be involved in somehow, and I get it. But I do think that does hurt Raw and the overall product on TV when they'll show Stephanie smacking Brie Bella, and the next thing, oh yes, Stephanie also went out and helped the homeless.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of controversy, we have to talk about this whole thing with Lana and Rusev, and they're getting a lot of flack. I know you're probably seeing it more involved on that side of the media than I am. Mm. To me, and I think sometimes I'm a little too sensitive to this stuff. I think it's all for nothing. I think they're really getting a raw deal here. It would be one thing if this was 1990 and Vince McMahon was trotting out Sergeant Slaughter for the first time, in 5 years with his turban and, pledging allegiance to Saddam Hussein. But these are two characters that have been on television for months and months, and they've been talking about the same stuff. And the promo in question at Battleground, I don't know. I just don't see. I didn't see anything wrong with it. The fact that she talked about Putin, she's been talking about him for 6 months, 3 months, however long they've been around. Yeah. And I think that I really think they're getting a raw deal on this one. And that's not to say that they haven't earned the flack in the past for things they've done, like filming that segment with Muhammad Hassan putting a hood over the Undertaker and mocking an execution. Right. But I mean, for this, I think it's like, come on, Yeah,
I agree with you. I think they are getting a raw deal. But can we just commend the WWE for once for finally being like timely on something? Like normally they'll tap into these subjects like 8 to 10 months later.
Yes.
I mean, a good example of that is Dancing with the Stars has been on for 10 years, and Fandango shows up like 3 months ago. It's like,
absolutely.
So I do think they're getting, and she did not say the Malaysian plane.
No.
She said recent current events. It could be any current event.
Yeah.
You can blame Russia for any current event. I do think they get the raw deal, but I do think they actually it wasn't bad press. They got press.
Yeah.
Which is good. I have more of a problem with the actual angle of Rusev and Jack Swagger. Like this is my thing. Like I feel like wrestling itself is beyond that. It just really is. I mean, I think the reason why is because I think the wrestling audience is way beyond that. Yes. I mean, as opposed to maybe only in times of like war and maybe something like this where it could, God forbid, lead to war. The us against them mentality, it's really not there in wrestling anymore.
No.
I mean, USSR, there was, Cold War, all that stuff worked.
Yeah.
But there's so many people in this country, and a good example of that is the World Cup. Everybody watched the World Cup. You know why? Because we're not all Americans anymore here.
Right.
It's a melting pot. It's a different thing. So I think that whole idea of country versus country is stale.
Chris, if somebody came to me 6 months ago before they debuted and told me about this whole idea, this gimmick, this character, I would have thought they were talking about something from like a low rent indie show.
Right.
And B, if it was my company, I'd probably fire them for being so uncreative. Yeah. Because you could not convince me in 2014 that a Russian heel angle would work in 2014. I mean, right. Of anything. I mean, it's like the Cold War was so our childhood. I mean, half the people today don't even know, the kids, the teenagers, they don't even know what the Cold War was.
Right. And you know what? And I'm going to say it right here. And I think you'll agree with me. The entire thing is over because of Lana.
Yes.
That's the only reason people care.
Yep. If
Rusev came out with some goofy looking 40-year-old guy speaking Russian, like Zeb Coulter, if like both times I loved the Jack Swagger angle. I liked the pro-American thing right now.
Yeah.
Because of it. And I liked when they were like this, kind of tea party kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if he was Rusev's manager, no one would care. But you have a hot blonde, probably one of the hottest blondes on the roster, coming out every time. People pay attention. And that's almost what got Rusev over. I mean, how many times have we seen the big unstoppable giant come out?
Oh yeah. And Rusev, I mean, he's good, but on his own, I mean, he'd be DOA.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I mean, Rusev is Ryback with a hot manager.
Yeah, I don't even think he has an ounce of the charisma that Ryback had.
Yeah, yes, and there's a guy that now is lost in the shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they do this thing where they take this guy, they do a huge buildup of him, and then he loses one match, and then, like, forget it.
Like Cesaro and Heyman.
I hate to say it, Bray Wyatt.
Yeah.
Now he's attacking part-timer Chris Jericho. I mean, like...
Not only that, Chris, they're giving him what chance? I mean, that's like the death blow right there, the what chant.
Yeah, I know. Now, did you, real quick, did you read this whole thing where people are speculating that, how he does the heavy breathing?
Okay.
That's to kind of stop the what chant because people don't know when to say the what because he breathes.
That's a possibility because he seems very bright from the interviews that I've seen of him. And a friend of mine actually just had breakfast with him and then interviewed him afterwards. And he was just telling me about how smart he is to the business. I mean, listen, his dad's Mike Rotundo, his brother, his uncle's Barry Windham, and his grandfather is Blackjack Mulligan. I mean, how can you not be smart to the business at that point?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they every single generation of the business is in your house or was in your house at one point.
Yeah.
But that's what, and I think that's a good. Now, Rusev, he's going to get out of this angle with Jack Swagger. He's going to go on to something else. He's going to get beat. And then you're going to see him forming a 5-man Russian tag team with to feud against the new Nation of Domination. And it's going to be,
RMB.
Yeah, like, I don't even know. It's going to, I mean, who would be the head of that to put together like a United Nations of wrestlers to fight the new Nation of Domination, or whatever they're going to be called?
Hey, I'm sure they could get Ivan Koloff for a couple of $100 in a phone call.
Yeah, or bring back Sergeant Slaughter. I mean, he's on payroll.
Yes.
You got to find an old wrestler, but I see that happening, and yeah, I don't understand this whole, USA Russia thing. I don't.
They're talking about a big push for a Rusev Cena feud where that Rusev is kind of how we were talking about before, where guys would go through Chief J and Putski, and that's kind of what they're doing with Rusev, is that he'll go through Jack, he'll go through somebody else, and then he'll get to Cena, and that'll be the big program.
But is Cena really Mr. America?
No, I don't think so.
Why don't they do a program with Hogan? They
should. It's actually, you know what? Now that we're talking about it, it's actually pretty smart to do the Cena program because you have all of this. You have all these problems with Cena getting booed, and even the biggest Cena hater is going to have a hard time booing him against Lana and Rusev.
I don't know. I think people would still side with him.
Maybe.
I think those legs could get anybody to agree on Cena. I don't know if I get, as long as it's not for the title, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
As long as the title is on someone else's waist, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I agree.
Now wait, if you think about it, could they be building to a Roman Reigns Rusev?
I definitely think so because, all joking aside, they actually had something going for that Battle Royal a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and that was like the most interesting part of it.
Yeah, and the people went nuts.
Yeah, that was fun. Now, I'm all for that. Like, maybe slowly get away from the Russian gimmick and maybe he's just a monster heel who happens to be Russian.
Yeah.
And you kind of put it in that. I'm for that. I'm okay with that. But but that being the main way that he draws heat, like maybe he should just draw heat because he should be like Brock Lesnar. He draws heat just because he kicks the crap out of people.
Yes.
That's what, and then he will be the full-time Brock Lesnar instead of there being a part-time Brock Lesnar.
I mean, if Brock Lesnar turns babyface at some point, I mean, there's a natural match right there.
God forbid. I don't ever want that to happen.
He's kind of like a babyface now. I mean, everybody loves him.
Yeah, you know what, though? Yes, everybody does love him, and maybe we can touch on this for a couple minutes. I think one of the things, and this was evident, this was the one bright. I mean, you said you liked the Stepping Man angle on Raw.
Mm-hmm.
I did too. That was probably my second favorite thing. My first favorite thing, just give me Paul Heyman talking for 5 or 10 minutes.
Yes.
I mean, the guy could convince me of anything. By the end of that, he had me literally convinced that Brock Lesnar was going to kill John Cena.
Yeah, and what's great about that is they wrestled, back at Extreme Rules 2012, and Lesnar lost, but you'd never even know that listening to Heyman's promo.
No, you wouldn't. And what I love about it too, and they finally figured this part out too, because they didn't do this in the beginning, they figured out not to hand Lesnar the mic after Paul talks.
Yeah.
Let Paul talk, let Brock just stand there and look like a badass, and then cut to commercial or fade to black or whatever. Just let Paul talk. I mean, after that promo on Monday night, is Paul Heyman the best talker ever in wrestling?
Not only is he the best talker ever in wrestling, I mean, I was going to write a blog on this, but I just couldn't think of a way to put it together. But my whole point was going to be just how brilliant Heyman is in the fact that I can't think of anybody else that was able to survive, 4 different decades now that he's been in the business. And it's not like he's a guy that's been in the business for 4 different decades and you look at him and you're like, all right, it's time to go, like a Hogan or somebody else. This is a guy that's not only been in the business for 4 different decades, but he has been relevant in every single decade. And what's amazing is he's probably getting his biggest push now 40 years later.
Yes, exactly. Yes,
it's amazing.
I agree. And here's one opportunity that I believe is getting missed. And I thought about this after the whole Raw thing. If I was Dixie Carter and TNA, I would throw so much money at Paul Heyman to say, come over here and fix us.
They didn't throw him enough. He was ready to go. And my math is horrible. It hasn't been 40 years, but but they already did.
Did they really?
He's gone on record about this. I've seen 2 interviews where he said what he wanted. He said he wanted a Dana White type deal with UFC, where if the UFC when the UFC went big, Dana White got rich. Mm-hmm. And what he wanted some kind of an ownership bonus or some kind of a kickback, some kind of a percentage deal, and they wouldn't give it to him.
I'd do it. I would do it right now. If I was starting a wrestling promotion right now, I'm a firm believer that the only reason ECW did not succeed is because he didn't have the money. He just you can't. There's not one part of ECW that I ever look back at and go, oh well, that was an awful idea. I mean, there was nothing about it that was bad except for they couldn't pay the bills.
I think that looking back at ECW, I think that if there was one weak spot that Heyman had was his business, is that and it would probably be different now because I'm sure he's learned a lot of lessons. And some of the most successful businessmen are guys that had 10 failed businesses before they finally got it right. Yeah, exactly. So, but I think his business, there are a lot of things you could look back on and see a lot of questionable business decisions and a lot of business decisions. I mean, I know, I used to do commentary with the guys that did ECW's production, the same production crew. I did commentary with them in different places, and I went up to their studio, and they used to tell me stories at lunch, and they would tell me stories where they would spend $25,000 on a television taping, and Paul wouldn't like the way somebody looked in the 3rd row or the 4th row, so they just threw the whole thing out. And
okay, well that's all right. So business-wise, but I'm talking like storyline, angle, character-wise, ECW was great.
Yes, and that's why it would work in TNA because he's not running the business. He would just be writing the shows.
Right, just write the shows. Just go out there, pick 1 or 2 guys that are the Paul Heyman guys, build them up. Just let him write the show. And I guarantee within 3 months, TNA would be a force against the WWE. And who knows, it might even spark the WWE to give a crap again.
Yeah, and I don't. At this point though, I don't think WWF's letting Paul walk. I don't think they're letting him go anywhere.
No, now they can't. I mean, now with Lesnar they can't. But getting back to it, I could listen to him. That made Raw. That made this Lesnar Cena feud even better. And that's one of the reasons to tune in every week is if Paul gets to talk for the next 4 weeks. I mean, he's been great the previous weeks, and he wasn't really even talking about anyone. He was talking about a person who wasn't there. I mean, like, yeah. Let me ask you this real quick, before we even move on to the next topic. What part of you, maybe not at all, from what I remember from what we talked about and what I read, maybe not at all, but let's talk, what part of you kind of really hoped he was talking about CM Punk?
What, this past Monday?
Yeah. Like, or 2 weeks ago when he said a plan C.
Oh, you know what? It never even occurred to me, to be quite honest with you.
Really?
It never even popped into my head.
You know what? It kind of popped into my mind only because he called it a plan C, which I understand Triple H says a plan B. The CM Punk thing, it looked kind of weird. But also because the weeks leading up to that, Heyman had gone on different podcasts and talked about Punk and why Punk left and Punk's frame of mind. And it just felt like one of those dirt sheet WWE swerves where it's like, Punk's never coming back, he's never coming back, he's never coming back. Oh, he's on Raw.
Oh, you're right.
And it would have made sense with Heyman that they were together, and what kind of ruined it not happening, what made it seem like it wasn't going to happen was because of the SummerSlam poster leak.
Yeah.
Unless that match was going to be not for the title, which never would have happened. But, a small part of me was hoping it was Punk.
Well, speaking of CM Punk, and I know we're right up against the clock here, and I mean we had so much on our agenda that we wanted to get to and talk about some different blogs and some different topics. So
should we save it? Should we save the Punk thing?
I think we should talk about Punk because it's relevant, and we can talk because it's more timely today.
Okay.
Because this actually just broke. I would say somewhere in the last 48 hours is that CM Punk was on some award show on Monday, and he made a flippant comment about him not wrestling anymore. But he said something about joking about a concussion, but kind of mocking it that I had a concussion or something like that. And according to Dave Meltzer, the WWE are pissed, and they're extremely irate at this point because they feel like he's making them look like fools, and he is. And the guy just I mean, whether you're a Punk fan or not, I know he has his supporters. People say, oh well, he should be able to quit if that's if he doesn't want to wrestle. Okay, here's what happened. The guy, his contract was up in a couple of months. He walked out of the company with a half hour's notice, and never really gave and apparently never really gave the company a reason for it. And the company had every legal right to hold him to his contract. And the company, from what I understand, continued to pay him his royalties and whatever merchandise money he would have been paid, which they had every right not to. And now what makes sense to me is the reason they did that is because they were gearing up for a lawsuit if he decided not to renew his contract, is that they were going to do everything that they were obligated to do in case they were going to go to court. And apparently they are looking to they are gearing up and they're going to go after him because this whole idea of him having a concussion but kind of like giving people a wink and a nod, at the same time he's telling people, I'm making a fool out of this $1 billion company. So, what are your thoughts on that? Should they go after him? Should he just shut up? And if they do go after him, what do you think happens?
Well, if that is true, and they had to contractually, they were obligated to pay him. They did all of that. That's good.
Well, actually, let me stop you there because Steve Austin's actually talked about this quite a bit on his podcast, and that he said that they are not obligated. He said when he walked out of the company back when he refused to do a job to Brock Lesnar, he said he lost about $1 million because they didn't send him a dime at that point because they didn't have to.
They didn't have to. It's a really tough thing. And I mean, we are talking about the guy who I'm not sure if it was real or legit, but this is the guy that sat down on a stage and basically blew up the company in front of everyone, and called out all the things. Was it a storyline? Was it fake? Was it real? I don't know. So we kind of know if that's the idea of like what we're dealing with here.
It was a storyline.
I know. Well, I mean, was it his idea? So it's kind of like, so that's the character they're building up. That's the person. Did it lead to this being the type of CM Punk that they're now dealing with? Possibly. who knows? It might have, triggered something like that guy really thinks he's that guy now, and that he can question the company and piss them off. Because I did hear, and he was on the Mark Maron podcast, and he talked about how he just didn't want to resign right before that happened.
Yes, I've heard that as well.
Yeah. So maybe this guy's heart's been out of it for years, and he's trying every way to get out of it by making himself look like the good guy, because no one ever lets you leave on your terms. You got to leave on some other terms. So he figured it was his only way out. Maybe he wanted to quit and didn't want to get paid. And the WWF, by paying him, like, it kind of strung it along. I don't know the whole situation. All I know is, do I want to see him back? Yes, because he was one of the more interesting characters. But when it comes down to it, this is business, and they're always going to do what's best for business. Not quote unquote Triple H best for business. I mean, like, they're always going to do whatever protects the company. So if it means, taking Punk to court over it, it's going to happen. Now,
I mean, they have to. In my opinion, they have to, because they have to make an example. Because who's to say John Cena doesn't decide to walk in and just say, I'm done, and after he signs a contract and they make booking plans for him for the next 8 to 10 months.
Right. Well, then they just got to start. You know what? They have to start putting in their plans that, like, if you walk out, you don't get paid anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like, that is in their contracts.
Oh, it is.
And that's what's really weird. But that's why Steve Austin didn't get paid. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And
okay.
That's what was really weird all along, is that Meltzer, I'll go back to Meltzer because he's been pretty on top of this, that he reported that they weren't withholding his his merchandising and his royalties, and nobody could really seem to understand why. But now with this talk about this lawsuit coming, now I guess I kind of get it, because they're just covering their asses to do whatever they have to do to fulfill their end of the deal. I think you got to go after him. I think you got to make an example. I think for him to mock the situation at this point is just stupid, because at the end of the day, he might have he probably has plenty of money to live comfortably, but at the end of the day, he only had 2.5 big years on top, 2.5, maybe 3 big years on top. So how much money does he have? So if he's going to find himself in a legal battle with a company of that size, that nest egg is going to go away pretty quickly. So if I were him, I would just shut up and just hope that this whole thing goes away, instead of mocking them and trying to make a joke out of it and egging them on, so to speak.
And not to mention that his sugar mama also works for the company.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're biting the hand that feeds you in 2 different ways, in your old contract and in your wife's current contract.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a tough situation. I mean, the one thing you have to remember about all this, it is still a business.
Yes.
And this is, just because it's wrestling and just because it's television and just because it's scripted, it is still a business, and you have to. But I think it also says something, and Punk has actually touched on this, as I said once before on the Maron podcast, about the working conditions of the WWE and what's expected of them. So maybe that clause about the walking out thing, maybe it's a common thing, and the WWF protects itself. Austin walked out because he didn't want to do a job, but I'm sure there's more than a few guys who, because of health reasons, want to walk because they just can't do it anymore. So maybe the WWF puts that clause in there because they know guys, they won't give them the time off that they want, or they have a concussion and they want him back 2 weeks later, or they have a surgery and they want him back 2 weeks later. And Punk knew that, and all these other guys know this. So WWE puts that in the contract that you can't walk because it screws them over. I don't know. Maybe it says something about the working condition.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I blogged a lot about this. I mean, my stance on it has been that it's extremely unprofessional, no matter how you cut it. Because
it is.
If he was unhappy for this long, that's fine. And if he knew he wasn't going to resign, that's fine. And if he knew he was gonna leave, that's fine too. But the several months before that, the Shield are putting him over. The Wyatts are putting him over. When he was on the rise, when he was rising up to the top, people put him over on their way out, and it helps him elevate. And he could have done the same. And he's the first one that'll do these shoot interviews, or that'll go on these Comic-Con Q&As and talk about guys being held down and guys not wanting, and other guys being unprofessional. But yet at the end of the day, he could have done a lot of good for guys like Daniel Daniel Bryan, Bray Wyatt, The Shield, as he was leaving, and put all these guys over, and he refused to do it. And you know what? He's entitled to do what he wants with his life, but at the same time, if he knew that's where he was going to go, he could have done more to help put these guys over on the way out, or at least stuck around to do so. I don't know. I just see it as extremely unprofessional.
I agree with that, especially because of how long they put the strap on him.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
Exactly. Well, I hate to sound like David Crockett, but we're out of time. But I think, I think what this does is it leaves us with an opportunity to come back, because we were going to talk about biggest bust in WWE history, Trish Stratus notwithstanding.
Yeah. Here's the good thing about biggest busts. They'll always be the biggest busts.
That's right. I can't imagine anybody else infringing on this list. I'll have a blog coming out about, I guess, some fantasy booking for 1984 and Hulk Hogan, but since we're not going to talk about it here, I guess I'll save that, and you and I will talk about it.
Save that. That's a juicy topic. Now, 1984 topic, but a juicy topic nonetheless.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun, and especially talking with you, a guy that grew up in the same era as I did and watched all these same guys. Mm-hmm. And something you wanted to talk about is just the difference in wrestling today versus 20 years ago as far as travel and the road, and that's something that Jim Ross talks about quite a bit on his podcast. So I think it'd be pretty fun to talk about as well.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to that.
Yeah, so for anybody out there that wants to follow Chris is writing about everything. He writes about wrestling. He's a published author. He's just always got something out there cooking. And you can follow him on Twitter at Chris Illuminati. And I will put your Twitter your Twitter handle in the post, so we don't have to go through the spelling and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, people are gonna butcher it, so just follow the link.
yeah, just follow the link. And Chris always has some interesting musings as well about Monday Night Raw. And of course, if you found us on iTunes, you can visit camelclutchblog.com, or you can even visit prowrestlingradio.com, where I have a whole bunch of archived interviews with guys that I did about 10 or 15 years ago now. So some good stuff over there. Well, Chris, this has been a lot of fun. Hopefully we don't wait another 6 or 7 years to do it again.
Yeah, because those topics will not be timely.
No, they won't. So I'd love to do this again. And I really had a good time today.
I did too, Eric.
Excellent. All right. And that's it for me. And we'll try and get another CCB podcast sometime in the next couple of weeks. And appreciate your follows. Welcome to another edition of the Camel Clutch Blog Extra podcast. And today's podcast is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to bounce around on different topics in today's wrestling. We're going to take a look at some of the current blogs on the Camel Clutch blog. We're also going to take a look at some upcoming blogs and just talk some old school, talk some new school, talk some rumors, talk about what went down recently at Battleground, and whatever else we could squeeze into the next 30 to 45 minutes. And it's a real pleasure today to be joined by a longtime friend of mine, Chris Illuminati. He is a published author. He's a freelance writer, big wrestling fan, has written many pieces about pro wrestling. So really excited to have him here on the podcast. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Eric, how are you doing, my friend?
Chris, I am doing great. I know we've been talking about doing a podcast together for about 6 years now. So
yeah, it's finally come to fruition. 6 years.
Yeah, it's a lot of hype. It's kind of like Sting and Undertaker. You just don't know if it can really live up to the hype.
It is. I just hope it's not like Sting and Hogan at Starrcade, where it was just the worst thing you've ever seen.
I just hope that it's not like Sting and anything he did in TNA.
That's true. I understand all the Sting rumors and the hype and everybody excited for him coming to WWE. And people ask me, they're like, are you excited to see Sting in the WWE? And I say, I would have been 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
If Sting moved over with the whole, and you know what? And why we touched on that, maybe because you have a much better memory than I do and mind. Why do you remember why Sting didn't make the jump over?
If I remember right, there were several occasions where Vince McMahon made a play for him, and he was just loyal to WCW. And then there was a point when WCW was sold, and if I remember this right, Sting kind of went through this I gotta choose my words carefully here in this PCAs. He kind of went through this whole change of life where he became a born again Christian.
That's what I thought.
Yes. And if I remember right, he just didn't agree with the direction that the WWE was going. But yet, you can go on, turn on TNA and have midgets masturbating in a trash can. So go
right.
figure.
Well, that's all part of God's plan, I believe.
Indeed. So that's kind of what kept him out. So let me ask you, Chris. A lot of people are getting hyped for this Sting Undertaker match, which I don't even think is going to happen. Yeah. But there are reports that he's going to. I hate fantasy booking, but I'm going to do it here anyway, and I'm curious for your thoughts on it. Assuming Lesnar gets the championship at SummerSlam, which we'll probably talk about at some point, you could either have The Undertaker start demanding this rematch somewhere towards the end of the year, kind of like how Triple H was asking like how he was asking Triple H for the rematch at 28, which was really, really weird in retrospect. And you have him start throwing out this challenge, and you have Heyman blowing it off. Why would we do this again? We already made our point. And you either A, have Undertaker enter the Royal Rumble and have him win the Royal Rumble and win a title shot and wind up putting up his career against Lesnar's championship at WrestleMania because he's got nothing to put on the line, or you have Undertaker cost Lesnar the title leading up to WrestleMania. So at that point, Lesnar demands to have the match. And again, Undertaker puts his career up against Lesnar. I think there is so much money to be made with that it just amazes me that people are overlooking that in favor of Sting, Undertaker, or Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with you. And here's what I like about what you just said. Here's where I see it playing out. Let's say, devil's advocate, not even devil's advocate, Lesnar walks away from Survivor Series with the title, okay? Mm-hmm. We all know the next big babyface is Roman Reigns.
Yeah.
But he's not quite ready yet.
Right.
So what I liked about what you said was, let's say Lesnar takes it at Survivor Series. Let's say you get Roman Reigns kind of ready. Instead of Reigns and Lesnar at WrestleMania, it's Reigns and Lesnar at Survivor Series. Reigns takes it at Survivor Series with the help of The Undertaker, causing a distraction, therefore setting up Undertaker and Lesnar at WrestleMania.
There you go. I mean, I think there's I don't think that there's another match that they could possibly put on paper with anybody at this point, Rock included, unless maybe they brought back Steve Austin, right, that would be as much of a draw as Undertaker going for revenge against Brock Lesnar.
Right. And here's what else I like about that too. You have a Lesnar loss, Reigns wins the title. It's not a legitimate loss because of interference.
Right.
Or whatever it is. You can have that feud kind of building in the background while Lesnar
at WrestleMania. I almost think it's better at this point in his career to just not do anything and kind of leave fans wanting more, because he's going to be 56 by the time he gets in there. And if you watch any of his TNA stuff, I mean, he's obviously lost a step, rightfully so at his age. What do you think? You want to see him in there? And if you do, who would you want to see him with?
Okay, I'm okay with nostalgia. I'll see him in there once or twice just for the old, gratification of it. But my problem is, because I'm such an old school wrestling fan, I want to see the bleach blonde, Stinger, that Sting. As much as I love the whole Crow and I love that whole angle in the beginning, if we're really taking it back, I want to go way back. Yeah. I want to go original Sting. What I don't want to see, I don't think I want to see the Undertaker match.
Yeah.
I get it. I get the nostalgia of it. I really wouldn't have wanted to see it if Undertaker was undefeated.
Yes.
Because if somehow Sting came out of it and that was the one loss, which I don't think that would have happened.
Yeah.
But because I don't think McMahon, he's not going to take arguably the most loyal person in his company and give him that one loss to a guy who wouldn't even jump ship and finally came over when it came down to like DVD sales.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, let's be honest. That's why he's not doing it for a career. It's not a career move. It's not I don't think he really cares about WWE Hall of Fame. I think it's for I have this legacy. The legacy is going to be on DVD and on this WWE Network. Let me try and control it as much as I can, because if I don't, it might be one of those situations where I don't know if a lot of people remember. Do you remember the first Ultimate Warrior DVD that came out?
Oh yeah, the self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior.
Yes, that basically bashed him for an hour and a half.
Yes.
Not that they would bash Sting, but he wouldn't have creative control over what people saw from his legacy. And knowing the WWE, they're going to put together a best of DVD with like Sting and RoboCop, Shockmaster, so
yeah.
I think that was part of the play here. Do I want to see him in the ring again? Sure, why not? Would I be crushed if he never wrestled again? No, not really.
Yeah. I think that
does his thing at WrestleMania against The Undertaker, and then rematch wise, you can bring it back all the way to SummerSlam again.
I love it.
If you have to. Here's the wrench I'm going to throw in it, though. We don't know Lesnar's availability. He's a part-timer. How part-time?
Yeah. And we don't know Undertaker's availability. I mean, all the rumors seem to be indicating that he's done. And,
right.
He had, I mean, I've seen these rumors pop up in the past after WrestleMania. I remember after 29, there were a lot of rumors that he was done. I mean, I'm not necessarily writing him off at this point. But, if we were going to look at it logically today, you'd have to say, well, the guy's telling his friends he's done. So
right.
Who knows?
Well, the great thing about The Undertaker is he never really has to show up. You just need a guy flicking the lights on and, throwing a couple thunderbolts and lightning, and The Undertaker was there, quote unquote, Yeah,
so, or they could reach out to Brian Lee.
Yeah, Brian. Is he alive? He's alive, right?
I believe he is alive, yes.
Okay, because this is terrible, but there's so many wrestlers that I get confused about who's passed away. There was one the other day, and I was reading, and I was like, "Wait, he's gone." It's Crush.
Yeah. You know what? When you thinking about it, if somebody had asked me if Crush was alive or had passed away, I'd probably say he was alive.
Yeah. See, I was doing research on something. And I was like, wait, when did he? You just sadly enough, you forget. Anyway, we got really morbid about that. But yeah,
yes.
all you need is a fake Undertaker, or they can even borrow the Kane hair.
Yes.
Or you know what? At this point, let's just use Kane, because he has lost so much credibility.
Yes.
The past 3 months that people don't even care when he walks out anymore. They're just like, oh, it's Kane.
It's so funny because you can see where they are today with Kane, that there is absolutely no long-term booking in that company, because right before he joins the corporation, he's in Team Hell No, and he's in a comedy team with Hugs and whatever with Daniel Bryan. Before that, he's stalking Zack Ryder.
Yeah.
Then he's Libertarian Glenn. I mean, it's so hard for anybody to take him seriously. I think if Kane showed up today and there was the opportunity to make it happen was back at WrestleMania 27 when they were showing those videos, those black and white videos, and they were having, I forget what it was. It was 217, whatever the year was. And they kept flashing.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. And everybody just assumed it was Sting. It was never going to be Sting. At one point, they did have some conversations, but there was so much buzz and so much hype. And it was 4 years ago. So Undertaker was in better shape. He had two great matches three great matches back to back with both Hunter and CM Punk. So he obviously could go back then. You're talking about Sting, who would have been in his early 50s, still old, but he still had some gas left in the tank. I think that was the time to capitalize on it. And I think once they weren't able to make it happen at 27, then I think you just shut the door on it.
Yeah, I agree. But, I think the WWE, they're going to want to cash in on nostalgia. They're going to want to cash in on, the last Sting. I don't know. We're talking about the Sting part of it. From everything we know about what happened at WrestleMania and everything we know about the Taker, can the Taker do it?
Yeah, that's a big question. And, I just had this conversation as a guest on somebody's podcast the other night. And, I don't know. I might be crazy here. And I've had people tell me that I'm crazy for assuming this. But there is a part of me that believes that somewhere in deep in Titan Towers that Vince McMahon and The Undertaker and Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar are the only people that know that they are building for a rematch at WrestleMania 31. And I know that there were just reports that came out that Undertaker is done and he's not going to wrestle, but I don't know, Chris. I'm looking at this thing and the way that Paul Heyman has been milking this streak. And we're talking about 2014, and this is an era where you see a finish on a pay-per-view and it's forgotten about, the next night on Raw. They don't even acknowledge what happened last week on television.
Right.
And here we are in July now, and Heyman's still milking it. And I think there are a couple different scenarios that you could pull off here. And I think the money would be huge for an Undertaker-Lesnar rematch, for Undertaker to come back and try and shut this guy's mouth. And I think that there are a couple of different avenues you can go down. And I hate